No audio. I've got a 16-second delay, haven't I? From hold on. Let's actually see if that's true. Oh. Oh, well, yes, I guess I am coming through because I did just double check myself to see that. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to Blood and Song, a special episode between Sean and myself. Sean has all the notes here, so I'm going to do this on the fly. We thought we would give you guys something in the great in between, which is the title of this episode. And we know that as that weird week that's in between Christmas and New Year where you don't really know what you're going to be doing with yourself. Do you work? Do you not work? Do you try to write all those Christmas cards that you missed and thank you cards for the presents? Do you buy those last minute gifts? What, do you decide, hey, on a whim, let's go away for New Year's? It's that weird time in between. And so we thought we'd give you a look back at the weird things that have happened in this campaign, but to the weird people, and those weird people is us, the characters.
Okay. All right. Well, I've sorted the audio out, so I should be back now. So, thank you for that, Ryan. Thank you for vamping while we got our audio sorted out. As you can tell, when Bradley's missing, none of these things go correctly. But any issues at all, audio, video, let us know in the chat. This will be a look back, as Ryan said, at the player characters of Erionwel. We're going to touch upon, I don't know about you guys, but there's been a lot. It's very dense. A lot happens. So it'd be helpful to have a look back and see where the characters have made significant choices or where they've teased a little bit about what might be coming up for them when we return in the new year. So this is like a sort of in between Christmas and New Year episode. So happy holidays, season's greetings. If you're watching this between Christmas and New Year, Merry Christmas. We're sending you lots of love. If you're watching this after New Year's, thank you for catching up and finding out some little tidbits. Of course, we're not going to spoil anything major. So if you want to go back, you can still go back and watch the previous or listen to the previous episodes. Any comments? Ryan's going to check them out in the chat as we go.
Yes, I'll be in
We've
charge.
already
I'll be
had
the
one
community
question.
manager for the night.
Yeah, we've already had one question from Taj, which we will touch on.
Two questions, which
we will
go
touch upon them shortly. I play Sixsmith. I'm Sean. I play Sixsmith. I also produce Blood and Song. I have a hand in the narrative and in the creative direction of Total Party Win, the sort of mother brand of Blood and Song. Ryan, he co-produces Blood and Song and
do all the project managing parts, make sure everyone's turning up on time, make sure everyone gets all of the social media parts of it.
Also, yes, handle some of the social media along with Christine, and you also play Ripper. So we're going to touch upon some of the moments and choices. No intro today. We're just going to go straight into it. And
let's try and act out everyone's intro video.
Oh, I can't even remember.
Let's see. Okay. I don't know who comes. Well, like my one's the dust my hands off, don't I? Some practical effects. What's your one? Yeah, that's that one. Dan's one is like gives one of those, doesn't he?
Yeah, he gives it some fire, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know what Johnny does. I can't remember. I haven't seen, because we're in the show. I haven't seen the intro since we first did it.
Johnny does one of these, doesn't he?
Right.
Does one of those. Christine, pair of glasses in it. Oh, have you got any glasses around here somewhere? I'll just use my hands. She goes. And then Bradley does a little wiggle, doesn't he?
Does he?
Yeah.
And of course, there's Becki, who is still present in the credits because, in respect and honor for her doing the bulk of the credits, almost all of the credits for us. So that was Becki's work.
She gives it one of these.
Very nice.
There you go.
Very nice. Blood and Song. We've had a fantastic theme tune as well. Mostly Dan and Johnny's work. We all had a hand in it a little bit as well. But in my head, it's just the Game of Thrones music. I don't know why, but it's just the da 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 da. That's all I can think of when I see our intro, which I suppose is a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. I think there's I think it's brilliant. Like when I first heard the music, I literally ran into my housemate's room and I was like, bruv, you've got to check out our theme song. It's so good. Like, I'm really happy with all of it.
Yeah, Dan and Johnny did fantastic work on that. Yeah, so I was going to say, speaking of fantastic work, but I'm not necessarily sure that it was in the last episode. Yes, we found the fiddle to bring in the solstice, but it was mainly the last episode that we did was a respite, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we had the episode before that there was a big war or a skirmish. It was like a skirmish. A battalion was unleashed of Chinelan forces. The bear. They bore the sigil of the bear, and they attacked the one of the fronts of
Billsfeld, attacking the village
Billsfeld.
of Billsfeld.
So there were a couple of glass cannons there to help us. A couple of Nurmengatians were there to help some of the men. They got wiped out almost immediately, and we were sort of left to sort of really brave this battle, essentially. So it was quite a tough battle, and what it did over the course, it was split over 2 episodes, and over the course of it, it really took a toll, I think, on our characters. So
Yeah.
we started to realize as we were playing, shit, these guys are going to suffer. They're going to suffer for this because it's the first big war that they fought together.
Yeah.
It's also the first war that any one of them would have fought, I think. So if we're looking I'm going to look at Faeza. I'm
Six
going
not
to
have
look at
fought as a captain?
yeah. So I mean, what I mean is some of them wouldn't have fought before.
Yeah, I definitely think
that sort
we
of
had
scale or less
yeah,
is what Six would have dealt with, really. He would have dealt with small, a little bit like the samurais of old. They would have protected from bandits and other sorts of things, and he would have fought as part of units, but would never have been responsible for just a few people against so many, I think.
mm,
People like Octavius may have done similar, as Six, maybe fought within a huge battalion or legion,
yeah.
but never sort of been
Well,
singled out
as
in
a
that way.
scout, I think that's why he froze a little at the beginning. You're very much not used to. He wasn't a grunt, was he? He wasn't
Yeah,
a grunt. He's very much a like I don't know if Brad was angling for spec ops, but he sort of feels like in that small like detachment.
he's the guy with glasses in the team. There's a team of like 6. One
Yeah.
guy's like Spanish guy. One guy's the explosives guy. It's just a big split of different, sort of, minorities and archetypes and all sorts. And
Yeah,
then he's the
stereotypes,
guy with
archetypes.
glasses
Yeah.
that like, looks at something real close.
Mm,
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll touch on
mm,
each character's the fallout of each
yeah.
of the war. I'll call it the war from now on because it's shorthand, but really I think it was like a small battle, I suppose you
Yeah.
would call it, wouldn't you?
Scrim. The scrim.
Yeah, or even a sort of it wasn't quite a siege, but
Yeah.
they were
It was a
besieging.
It was a scrimmage, basically, wasn't it? Big
Yeah,
scrimmage. Let's call it a
yeah.
scrim.
So we'll
Just
sort of
so to touch on that, I know Taj got loads of questions in the comments here, and we'll go through some of these.
we'll
Some of
get
them
through
are
all of them
character
by the end for
focused,
sure.
and we'll get through them when we get to the particular characters. I've got them in the feed here, but one of the ones he's asked to do with this is, does the bear sigil actually? What does the bear sigil actually do? Is it just to band the troops together? So the different armies of Janella fly under different sigils of animals. We have dealt with the Lion Legion, which is Octavius's brother. And also, I believe Octavius is one. It's the one that he's got burned into him. We've dealt with the Griffins who built the roads. And then this bear seemed to have been an attacking force. And the actual standard that they had with them was what I imagine gave them was like a buff, was like if that was up, it buffed the troops somehow. So the different sigils is basically the different departments.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Well,
there's a more militaristic term for that.
I
But
would actually be interested because our characters don't really
battalions.
know. Yeah, well, they don't really know our characters what the bear is
Yeah.
yet. So that hasn't
Octavius
been
might know,
revealed to
but he
us.
hasn't told us.
Yeah, Octavius might know, but as we'll go into, he's left us momentarily. So yeah, so there's a very good chance that he will know. But they're all very young, right? So they're very bold. And when we interrogated, so Docs, who we'll move to first, I think. Docs interrogated one at the end of the battle, and didn't they mention something like they were just testing the waters or pushing the boundaries or something? If I remember correctly, they were trying to take advantage of an opening. They were very dismissive. He was very dismissive and sort of like, well, this is what we do. So maybe that speaks to larger change within Chinella. I don't know. But I can say that they were all very young. That was something that Johnny impressed upon us a lot. That they were very young recruits and troops, and lots of young men and women that wouldn't be going back to their families, which we will also speak to when we come to Lack's segment of his what he got up to with that.
So who are we going to deep dive in first?
Well, I think it's worth just briefly saying. So in the last episode we took a moment just before the solstice. There was a big party. There was a contingent of younger people in Nurmengard who are much
In
more
Bildsfeld.
in Bildsfeld, who are much more sort of free and comfortable and young, and they have that sort of energy. And we sort of washed the viscera off us, but also the mental viscera we washed off of us, and it was a catalyst. The war or the skirmish, the moment, it was a catalyst for our characters to decide, well, what do they want to do going forward as a team? If they're going to stick together, what are they going to do? There are many plot threads that we'll talk about that they've put behind them, and there's many in front of them. So they took a moment and decided that they would, I think informally, because this has only been talked about in one episode, and we haven't had a chance. After Christmas, one of the first things we'll be doing is exploring and expanding that idea of what we're colloquially calling in our WhatsApp chats the Order of Chaos. I'm not 100% that will stick. I personally, I like the Order of Chaos because I'm an idiot and I like those sorts of things, and I think we should be called the Order of Chaos.
I mean, let's not forget that in other campaigns the main characters in NADPOD were literally called the Band of Boobs, and then in their newest campaign they were called the Two Crew because they all
Right.
kept rolling twos.
Yeah.
So stranger names have come about.
Yeah,
Can't all be
definitely.
as lofty as Vox Machina, whoever
No,
the
you're
other
right.
one's
You're
called.
right. And also, we've been talking about a team name, and when we were masquerading as a band, it didn't feel right. We were like, oh, is there a name that we can use? And nothing felt right, so we were just sort of playing with a bunch of things. I'm not saying the Order of Chaos will be what we're called, but I can tell you that order and chaos are the two things that we're all warring with at the moment. Our own internal struggles are all to do with order and chaos, and whether that's internal or external. With Octavius, I'm sure it's very internal, which we'll get to. With Six and Lack, it's very external, and we'll speak to some of that as well. So, with that in mind, I definitely think it's worth touching on our newest member. Joffrey plays Dox. Dox is you'll have to correct me as well.
He's a satyr.
He's a satyr. I was going to say he's a fawn
A
of some
fawn.
kind, right? Yeah. He's a satyr, and I think it's fair to say he wears his sort of damage on his face. He wears his curse and his sort of his history, and I think he's quite grizzled.
Well, he mentioned the backstory, obviously because played by Joffrey as well, a newcomer to us as a group. He mentioned that in his backstory, his town was taken over by the monsters. He was tortured. His family were killed. In his last moments, he prayed to the gods to release his unholy powers effectively. And a trickster deemed it like a smart idea effectively. And so that's
A
where
monkey's
he
paw
sort of
type thing, and it's
yes.
involved because I don't want to speak to too much of this in too much detail because that's for Joffrey and also for Dox. But if I remember correctly, it allowed him to, or it gave rise to the ability for him to kill his wife. Is that right? There's some
I
kind of
think so.
there's something around that where Joffrey Joffrey's an open book, but Dox is a closed fist. So it's very difficult to get a read on him, as much as he proclaims he's the funny one in the group.
Well, he was. Maybe he was a funny guy turned
So
monstrous.
so he is. I think it's fair to say. So some of these. So I've asked for some notes. We asked for some notes
Yeah.
from people so that we could understand where they see their characters in this space at this moment. And Joffrey did mention that it's been a long time that the companionship has come to Dox. So he's uh, hoping to enjoy life via this companionship. He's hoping to find, I suppose, bring some joy back into his life via our group of reprobates, which is interesting because I think we're all finding relationships with Dox, aren't we? I know that Six has taken a real knock on his leadership. I don't think that he feels listened to or even confident, and some of that may come from the fact that in this part of the world he actually doesn't know anything. So his bluster and maybe pretending or thinking, truly thinking that he's right, could lead down some of the wrong paths. And he sort of realized that, I think, over the last 3 episodes, and so looks to Dox for some kind of leadership in this place. He is the MKP. He's the most knowledgeable person. Dox is the person that knows this area.
That was bad. That was a bad.
What's that?
MKP.
That's what it is. That's the most knowledgeable person. That's how it works. That's my civil service.
I suppose I say SME for me, for subject matter expert. So it's about as bad.
But yeah, so this is interesting. So Joffrey's popped down that he's developing a hate for the establishment, power, government, and questioning everything. And he's wondering that if history is written by the victors, where I imagine he's wondering where is the truth? Where does the truth lie? And that feeds very much into the Order of Chaos, or TBC, name TBC, because that's what we're all feeling, I think, to some degree, which is interesting. And I'm wondering if is it too soon, because a lot of us don't know Dox. We're trying to get to know Dox. So is it too soon to be putting our faith and trust in someone? I mean,
well, there's the interesting story, or the interesting sort of anecdote when it comes to D&D, not just about characters but PCs. Like, when we're all inclined to trust Dox because he's played by Joffrey, because he's a friend, right? No, unless you're sort of playing a particular kind of character, you very rarely in a group game try and be the person to screw people over. So I find that interesting that we are trusting him quite off the bat. To be fair, he's not been a guarded person, and based on the character styles that we have, we've been trying to eke out, especially Ripper has the faith connection with him, but is also trying to eke out some of that comedy, some of the light within him, which I think is Ripper's whole thing. And so that it's trying. And I find that interesting because, yeah, you're right. Maybe Dox may lead us to sacrifice. We don't know. That's the cloak and dagger,
Joffrey described him as a coiled spring that could snap in either direction. So it's interesting that you say that. So if we succeed, particularly, I would look to Ripper being a sort of beacon of light, or the light of Illyria. If we can pull him towards the light, then we may be a positive force for him. But the chaos element of the Order of Chaos may pull him down
let's sort of not forget that we met him. He healed us. We shared food with him. We, in the last episode, we got, Ripper tried to change the public opinion of Dox through the words of the Scalds. But then at the same time, he did obliterate a whole bunch of people on a battlefield and torture someone afterwards. So,
yes, he was very quick to torture, actually.
Yeah.
I think that, that's a very interesting point. And I think that the more we learn about Nurmengard, the more we learn about their customs, and the more we learn about how why they not the broad not in the broad sense, but exactly why he has been sort of an outcast, and more about how the structure, their sort of politics, their faith, how that sort of stuff works. I think the more we understand that, the more we understand Dox, and then more will be revealed about how not trustworthy, but I think the layers will unfold on Docs.
Of course.
So it's very much tied with how much we
And
know about Nurmengard, which at this point is very little, because we
yes,
just got here.
and Joffrey has been, and Dox has been a character that we have known for 6, maybe 7 sessions. Could be wrong about that. In terms of as a character, in terms of our world, and the rest of us, we've had a good steady 5+. So it's interesting, to see that, and we'll talk about our character developments, but how soon, quickly, not only Dox is slotted into that, but also what changes are potentially coming for him in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Do we have any questions that we want to go to before we move on from Docs to Lack?
No, not as yet. Nothing's come through yet. If there is anything, we can always circle back quickly. But yeah, if there's any questions on Docs, we'll see if we can answer them best. If not, we shall. Let's check in with Lack, shall we?
Yeah, just to sort of finalize it, I think that Docs will be a catalyst, actually, in many ways, spreading outwards. So a lot of characters will be able to confront who they are and what they're dealing with through Docs. So I think he's a very very fine addition to the team. Very exciting. Lack, however, brother to Sixsmith, brother to my character, played by Dan, our cousin Dan. Lack started as a very sort of quiet, almost mewling, sort of soft sort of character that you could see.
Well, he is young as a person.
Yeah,
in the world. I think he's one of the
Lack.
youngest of us.
And he played very much a sort of second fiddle, and wanted to sort of sort of soothe rifts and be this sort of quiet voice of reason, let's say, in the face of his older brothers, sort of vocal, loud voice of reason. And Lack went around trying to form bonds with everybody in the party in little pockets. And I feel like what's interesting about the evolution of Lack is that he's due to some of the humorous bits about like his monk school and stuff, when he brings up all of the torturous sort of activities that have come to him. Which in the last episode, by the way, we won't spoil it here, but he brought that up when we were cleaning ourselves. He brought up some of what had happened in the school and some of what's happened, why he left and other sorts of things like that.
And I always equate it to, this is going to be a strange pull, but the sort of school in ninja assassin, which is sort of is what I equate to Lack's upbringing being like.
In what way?
Just sort of the way I remember in Ninja Assassin, he's brought up like.
Oh, you mean literally the movie Ninja Assassin?
Like the movie Ninja Assassin, yeah, where he's literally training to be a ninja assassin, and sort of the way that he describes the things that maybe that
it's
like
is
League
what
of
Shadows, isn't it, from Batman Begins or something? It's like that sort of being trained by this force and then finding out that they
are evil.
possibly are sort of misaligned with you in fundamental ways. And I think that so Dan's put some notes here about power, and I think that what we're talking about is quite interesting. So this school has maybe been a catalyst to give him this anger that he says is at, and I quote, the power. So he has inside of him a need to overthrow. There's a chaos in the world, and he needs to tear it down in order to build anew. That's something I definitely think that he shares. Fundamentally, he shares that with his brother Six. I think they both, and maybe they got that from their mother, their shared mother. It's possible. Although Dan and I would have to sort of really figure out whether that's where it comes from. But
it might be interesting that the pilgrimage that your mother sent you on wasn't to discover the wonders of the world, but to discover that it's broken and it needs refixing.
Well, that's a real possibility, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's something that Dan and I haven't talked about, but what's beautiful about being family and being very similar as we all are, is that we can sometimes sort of go, yes, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't realize it. So it's very possible. It's very possible that this journey Dan's popped that the wondering what the mother's journey was, and with the admittance of not knowing she had died, wanting to properly grieve with his brother, those are things that also are not necessarily possible at the moment. possible with all the zipping from pillar to post, as Lack said in the last episode, being led around. He's not been able to set his own direction, as it were. Obviously, in the story, this isn't a failing with Johnny or anything. This is just something that's happened to his character. He feels like he's just been told to go to this monastery. He leaves off his own accord, and then he's told to do this. He's told to do that. So I find that fascinating, and it's the I think a lot of that stuff has led to his behaviour at the end of the battle, right? So if we remember, the school it has popped a darkness in him, and this darkness led him to kill that chap in the alley. He sort of stabbed him and killed him in cold blood, didn't he?
Yeah,
a young man, a young person just like him. That's something that I think he deeply regretted. And then there's obviously the business with the shard, which it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if Dan regards it like this, but I thought that him taking up the shard was very much a way of sort of trying to take a destiny or try and control something.
Yeah, well, it spoke
like a
to
disorder.
him, didn't it?
So
it
like in the
spoke to
same way
him.
that so like after the death of his mother, it's possible that he's and leaving his school, it's possible that Lack is trying to grab a hold of something and control it. The same way that people get certain disorders around control.
I can't.
Following,
I think
death and other sorts of things.
I think we ended up giving the shard to Dan, because I think it's giving the shard to Lack, sorry, because it spoke to him, and I think that's why he became protective of it. And ultimately, it was also what allowed him to harness some of the power that's inside of him, right? Like he, mostly for flavor, but it's the thing that allowed him to have his astral arms.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, yeah, because one of the things he's wondering is whether it's connected to the shard or not. Are his astral arms? Is that also connected to the words of power, which I think we'll move on to when we talk about Six? These words of power that Six and Lack have both learnt in their past. They both learnt the same word of power that I think that Six believes was the catalyst for waking up some of their powers. We'll get onto that when we talk about Six, but there was a moment, wasn't there, where Lack and Six both used the same phrase, and for Lack, I believe it sort of it used the shard's power, unlocked the shard's power in some way, and for Six, it was the emergence, at least publicly like that, in front of the team, of his Loxodon form, his sort of this celestial form of his that sort of mirrors Lack's arms. Whether they are related or not, I think is also something. Very early on, that was something that Six was worried about, but at the moment he's worried about far, far smaller things, like how do we keep everybody alive, and how, so I think for Lack, that's what he's worried about at the moment.
Do you think you guys could become a Megazord and be like a giant elephant, like Loxodon elephantine with 4 arms off the back of it,
riding a celestial bull,
like you
riding
guys do? Riding Treacle.
We'll ride
no, because you're already a Loxodon, aren't you? So you just come in bounding with 4 arms.
It's possible. Who knows? I mean,
like a Megazord, basically.
We could do that, couldn't we? When we get to Six, we'll talk about some of his celestial.
So I wanted to sort of touch back in. I think that one of the things that Dan said about his character. So we sort of looked at the origins. Now, if we use the skirmish as another example, Lack was the only one to go down in that skirmish from us. Like when we say go down, we don't mean like hit 0 HP, and he had all 3 of his death saves done. He fully died. And it was with the good graces of Docs that we were able to revivify him and bring him back. And so, and there was a really amazing moment between Docs and Lack, of when Lack sort of said, he basically said, "What's the point? Like, I'm good here, like, there's nothing. I've come out. I've tried to find tried to find the reasoning of his mother, tried to be with us, and he keeps getting pulled, pillar to post, not understanding, being led, much like he was, in his monastery, not being able to free think, and there's been all these horrible things, and I think Lack made the decision to come back, but it was with a renewed vigor. I think he said
Well,
after
he said,
death.
as Dan said, it's finding that he wasn't the problem. It's understanding that he wasn't the problem.
Yeah,
Thinking that he was, it was his fault that he had to go to the monastery. It was his fault that he had to run away from it. Like blaming himself. Being able to shed that anxiety and self-blame
hmm.
seems to have made him. It seems to have brought a fire out of him, and I think as Dan puts very rightly in the notes he sent us, he's not going to run anymore.
Yeah,
Or at least
yeah,
I imagine that means not running away from trouble, because I think
yeah,
we'll all be running into trouble headlong.
yeah.
After
And
this.
also, he is quite literally the fastest runner of all of us, so he will be doing a lot of running.
Yeah, and we'll talk. Well, listen, we'll get to this when. Yeah, exactly. We'll get to this when we talk about Octavius, but
Hmm.
his decision afterwards to use the spear to drive it into
It wasn't the spear, it was just the shard crushing heads like with a
just the
rock.
shard,
Just just using the shard.
destroying the faces of each of the young men.
Hmm.
Um, an
all
interesting
all
choice.
100 of them.
So we've talked about this, haven't we, in the past? And I think what happens when we act these characters out, not being professional actors, but also professional acting not being a massive part of that, actually a
Hmm.
massive part of D&D. It's much more, collaborative storytelling, and then I always feel like it's instinct. In the moment, you make decisions that you think your character would feel. You feel what your character
Yeah,
would feel. You make those choices, and then I think in that intervening week, I think, was it too far? Was it not far enough? How can I course correct? And that's when we discuss with each other offline, and sort of cut. Maybe I might say, "Oh, can this happen? Can that happen?" Or I might say
yeah,
nothing, and I might surprise people. Um, and I might think, right, if Dan thinks right, Lack went too far, he'll apologize, or he'll pull back, or he'll do something in reparation. Um, so so regardless of what comes out of that, that's interesting to all of us. But for Dan to have made that decision for Lack in the moment is very, very interesting. So for that
yeah.
to be the moment, for Lack to have made that choice after that battle, it was almost like a
Hmm.
desperate
And we
act
know it affected the
from
shard
Lack.
in some way either as well.
Yes. So as Johnny made
So
very
what does
clear,
that
it has
mean?
done something to the shard,
Hmm.
exactly.
And I think he's not. It leads into that, and he has the same feeling that Docs has. And when we're all sitting in the makeshift dam bath, he is not happy with authority and power, and um, he wants to throw the world into chaos. I think and that leads us into a question that's come in from Taj, which is how chaotic is Lack gonna get? And
It's a great question. So
mm,
we can let you in on a little bit on the process. So um, Dan sort of sent us a message afterwards, because I think it's we being a chaos goblin is a negative. If you're just
yes,
being chaotic
absolutely,
for the sake of it, you're ruining everybody's fun for your own needs. You're being
I agree.
selfish.
Yeah,
However, if you're chaos, it sparks something new in the team, or it
mm,
creates something interesting, or it does something for the stream. It does something for
yeah.
everybody. That
Now,
can be a real spark, right?
yeah,
So Lax chaos. So he messaged us and said, "Is this too much? Did I go too far? Is it okay if I push a bit more?" Is what Dan said to us.
mm,
Um, and my personal opinion is that knowing that Dan would never push too far, knowing that Dan understands how to work as a team,
yeah.
and he knows Lack, I'm intrigued to see where he goes, and
Because
we'll all act accordingly.
I've seen, and I listen to a lot of campaigns. One of the ones I'm listening to at the minute is Casters and Castles, which is basically the Overwatch League casters playing Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the things that one of the characters is he is quite a chaotic character, but what he does, it doesn't directly fuck with the party. Like he changed the wind on a Sky City that they were going to, which didn't it wasn't like, fuck you, I'm doing this, and fuck you, I'm doing that to the people at the table, but he sort of messed with the flow of things. But it wasn't, so it's that level of chaos. Where is
Mm.
the boundary to chaos? And I think there are definitely people who will try and mess with DMs, try and rule break, try and character break, and I think, as you touched on earlier, it is collaborative storytelling. Is that we're here mostly for escapism and collaborative storytelling,
Yeah.
not trying to have the biggest dick in the room.
Yeah, and we fight enough battles in real life, you
Mm.
know, and on stream we don't want to be fighting with each other. So I think we're all pretty good at sort of saying if our characters have arguments, we'll afterwards we'll message and say, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?
Yeah.
This is what my character's feeling or thinking."
Mm.
What I'm going to try and do is bring that more onto the stream. So I think it's important for me to sometimes be a bit more honest about where Six is coming from, because often he's blusterous, and sometimes he believes something is right, and that's why he fights for it. And sometimes
Yeah.
he's trying to put a front on and he fights for it. And I think it's worth. I think I'm going to say to people, this Six is trying to do this, or he's actually trying to do this, or he's coming from this place, and that might help in those moments. It might that's the sort of understanding you have of people once you're with them in real life for quite a while. You understand the meaning behind what they're saying. And I think so. Talking about meaning behind what they're saying, off Loki is an element that Lack has not really revealed in great detail to the rest of the party. So off Loki seemingly is a sort of strange and omnipotent character that appears out of nowhere that has been in the ear of Lack since the start. And I think that Lack is quite unhappy about that, because it then feels like another system of control. There's no agency for him. He's just being manipulated by another power that isn't sort of being honest with him.
Yeah.
So that was very clear in our discussions with Dan, is that off Loki being in control of him, or with powers that he can't yet fight, that is something that is gnawing away at him and contributing to some of his confusion. And Dan himself Lack hasn't told us anything about it.
Yeah, and we ended our final episode, our last episode, with us drunkenly stumbling into a house with off Loki in it. So, we'll see how.
Yeah, with our holiday home, our cottage or whatever, we roll back into our cottage after a night of the calm after the storm. You know, we had our moment
celebrating
of
the solstice.
We celebrated as so we deserved to, and we stumbled into the house with off Loki in there. And that's going to be some real revelations between Six and Lack, because Lack has been keeping this sort of stuff a secret. This information that has been bestowed only to Lack, that could be critical, and could be shaping and have shaped how and why they've been doing the things they've been doing. Some of the characters don't know about, why that is. So it's going to be very interesting to, when we come back after the new year, for the characters to have that conversation with off Loki. Basically, also they're all pissed, right? So they're all drunk. So that's going to be brilliant. I mean,
of course, unless someone casts Greater Restoration on me, I'm staying drunk.
I watched the movie Mimic, and it's a terrible. I think, did we talk about this already? It's a terrible movie.
I don't think so.
But it's Guillermo del Toro. It's like his worst movie, and he hated it making it because it was within the Hollywood system, and he was like sort of vowed to work outside of it. But essentially, there was a moment where everybody thinks they won, and they all get pissed. And then as they're getting pissed, they realise that the sort of monster comes back, and then they all have to go. And it's not explicit, but the monster wipes a load of them out because they're all really incapable at this point. They're all really messy, and they don't have the upper hand. And I sort of like that. I like these big moments in movies working when people are not at their best. And so it'd be interesting to have this grand, big, pompous, sort of mysterious reveal, but the characters are very raw, right? They're very open. So yeah,
Do you know what? I might actually get drunk before the stream and see what happens. That'd be pretty funny.
Yeah, well.
I mean, listen. Drunk D&D is an actual thing, and we still need to do a drunk stream episode.
We do.
So to transition to maybe one of the other characters, got another question from Taj here. Maybe a bit of an elsewhere question, but he has asked, do you think Six and Lack will fight each other at full power?
Man, so Taj is like, that's something. It's one of those things where we may end the entire stream at some point having people going, I wish we'd seen that. I wish that had happened. It's one of those things that you really want to see, isn't it?
I mean, be fair, you would a monk versus a fighter it'd batter you, basically, because monks are good at that. But
they're good,
if you get the right hits in,
yeah, I mean, it depends if I could get any of my Battle Master maneuvers off quick enough. That's the thing. If I can drop him prone and do a few other bits and pieces. I could hit him out of the air while he's doing his leaps and whatnot. There's plenty of interesting things, and that's even providing that I actually still have a sword and shield and not haven't switched weapons in some way. So, and also it depends on the forms that the characters take.
True.
I certainly think that there'd be no reason in the game at all for either of them to go at each other 100% not holding back. They might have a skirmish. There's nothing to say that if the boxing match, like, no, I don't literally mean a boxing match, but I mean a fight between brothers isn't gonna it let
wouldn't
off some steam.
I mean, it'd be fair because Lack's got four
Lack's got
extra
four
arms.
arms.
Four extra arms, yeah.
Now hit him below the belt. Now hit him with those two other arms. All right, real
How are
arms
those
only.
other two?
What those
I'll
other
save
two
them.
up there? Yeah, so I don't know, man. It's a good question. I think there'd be no reason to. They're brothers. They love each other. So even if they fight, and they will, and there's lots of things that tear them apart and put them back together again, and I can sense more stuff's coming, particularly because they're both, broken and needing and fixing in different ways. And grief does mysterious and strange things to people. They may fight, but they would never go 100% at each other. But the question of I won't answer this question with Dan not here as to who would win.
Yeah.
But
Listen,
the older brother would pull his punches. I can tell you that.
I can tell you one thing. At some point, Ripper's gonna wrestle Black and Six because just for fun.
Well, he's got that interior touch, hasn't he? The Ripper. So
yeah, well, you wrestle with your bros, didn't you? That's how you do it. So
maybe if they need their heads knocking together, like maybe Ripper can be the person to physically, literally do it, and also metaphorically knock their heads together.
Yeah,
it's possible. That seems to be his role, isn't it? As a peacemaker.
Yeah.
So before we move on to 6, I think it's interesting. So Dan has one final note. He's put that Lack is scared of returning to Indhiri to confront his guru and the elite group. So I guess that's how he's describing them. But he is determined to do so. So that is one of the things that eventually, when we get to Indhiri, that will be what one of Lack's motivations, his goals. If this was Lord of the Rings, that's him throwing his ring into Mount Doom. So he has to go back and confront his guru. It's interesting. So I didn't know about that. Sean didn't know about that. Six definitely doesn't know about that. And he's only just now finding out that his school wasn't the way he thought it was. He thought Six, I guess, was thinking, he doesn't know anything of the real world. He's just gone to university for 3 years. He hasn't seen real battle like me. He hasn't been out there learning from the people. He's just been privileged. His mum sent him to a privileged university. He's gone off
up in the mountains.
Up in the mountains. He's been on a jolly. And now I think that it may not happen immediately, but they're going to have those conversations where they sort of knit the reality, the idea versus the reality. So yeah, the idea of returning to Indhiri is something that both all three of us actually, the Indhiri boys are sort of wishing for and dreading in equal measure. So do we have any? That was our question.
That was the last questions for Lack. Yeah. So we're moving on to you now, right?
I think it's probably worth moving on to 6. Yeah.
So any questions for 6? Chuck them in the chat, and
I hope that answers your question, Taj. I don't think there's a universe where they would go at each other with that. I mean, you've got siblings, haven't you? And I think that you might have a skirmish or an intellectual skirmish or something. You might hate each other, but you'd never go and not pull your punches. One of them would pull their punches, and I think it would be 6 because he can back up his words, but he is also he's 100% bluster on top of the 100%. So he's 200% chutzpah, 200% balls, but he's 100% 100% he'd still see it through. But that still means he's got a whole load of nonsense on top of that as well. So what's interesting about Indhiri's calling, sort of what's on the back of what's on Six's back is that he's on a leave from the Indhirian army, and he's on a leave sort of indefinite leave of absence, but obviously he's expected to return. And I think if he hasn't vocally already discussed it with the group, he's definitely been thinking that he's not going to be able to do as much good as he thought whilst being in the Interior Army. So one of the things that he'll have to confront is leaving the army, bearing in mind that he got his part of his initiation ritual utilized the phrase that Lack and Six have both had their powers awoken by. So this sort
Which
of
is
in the land of Erionwel, I believe, because it's been a while since I've said it, but it was my life with great joy, something like that, something like that. I can't. I've got it written down
I
somewhere.
think it's
Right?
my life with great honor, isn't it?
Well, so maybe someone who knows more about it than us. If Dan was here, he'd know. But so in his training, that was part of that hasn't awoken anything in many people or anyone that he knows, but in him that did something to him. So maybe he feels like that comes from the army, this scripture that they found long ago and utilized in their initiation rituals. But what will happen is he left a team of 5. He left a team of 5, and I like to think of them as like Rogue One or like like any sort of team like Blade 2. They all have like comical characteristics. You have like a wisecracking Aarakocra gunslinger. You have a sort of beefy sort of guardian type character. You have a sort of Jack the Lad who wants to be in charge. And you have like a sort of love interest. So his second is 2IC, his second in command, is his. He won't admit it yet, but it's sort of like his childhood crush, his childhood love, and there's nothing romantic that's happened between them, but there is, they have that sort of will they won't they sort of Valerian in the City of Planets type sort of thin man repartee between each other, and she's a great archer, a battle master like him, but with a ranged weapon, which is why I mentioned ranged weapons earlier on. So I feel like also in that there is a character that wants to be leader, that wants to take over. So I think that they will come to a head as to what they do about Six, because his desertion, as I'm sure it will come to pass, will lead his team to come and find him. I know that for sure. I just don't know how he's going to either try and leave the army, or desert the army. I just don't know. And here's the interesting thing: will that bring him closer to Octavius or not? So we'll get to that at the end. But will that bring him a link between Six and
So
Octavius?
Taj has asked, does he think Six has lost his purpose?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when it began, Six was very much focused on. So he has. I'll answer it by explaining a little bit about his another aspect that we may go into in the new year. So his celestial power, his Loxodon form, that he goes into as in a rage, in a battle rage, and only certain people can see this aura around him anyway. This form of his has been developing over a little bit of time, but he's not quite sure what it is or where it comes from. It sprouts almost like like mutant powers in the X-Men, or like
It's like going Super Saiyan.
Yeah, exactly. But it's only happened. It's only really it sort of awoke in him when he started at the army, but it's only been forming over in such significance.
Since we as a party have been going to almost artifactual places. We
So it
went to the
could indeed be
tomb,
linked to the gods. It could
and
indeed be linked to the shard.
we've
Yeah.
been going to sort of like the places that your archaeologists, your Lara Crofts, your Indiana Joneses sort of go to. Hallowed isn't the right term because that is used in these sort of places, but like
places of the ancient world.
Yeah, sort of mystic
or with
places,
connections
aren't
to
you?
the
Yeah.
ancient world. Yeah, sure. And so with this power sprouting in him, and he doesn't know whether he'll be able to control it or not, but at the moment it's taken a back seat to the more immediate sort of nature of their group and his brother's sort of shortcomings, as he would see them, or weaknesses, or his want to look after his brother. So initially he was thinking, Lax arms, I know what they are. That's what's happening to me. I need to make sure he's okay. We need to see Mum's pilgrimage through, and whilst this is happening, I'll find out if Lack is okay. I'm going to keep a watchful eye on him, and he still is. So I think he hasn't lost his way in terms of that. But I think that he's starting to realize, as they all are, that the world isn't quite the way they thought it would be. There's more negativity than positivity, and the structures, they run deep. So whilst I would say that he still needs to handle his own sort of changes, and he's trying to look out for his brother's changes, they're on hold until he knows that they're safe as a group. And I don't think he feels like they are safe. He knows they work well on a battlefield as a team, but he doesn't think they're safe. Octavius runs away. Lack kills things and runs away. Doctor's a torturer, although maybe that's how they do things around here. He's not quite sure. Faeza pulls her punches, frankly, in battle.
And listen, Ripper's the only one who's fought side by side with you.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes Ripper plays the fool. So Six is really worried about I'm not. I'm loving every single bit of all of this stuff, right? Of course, as if that needs to be said. But Six feels like he's maybe lost his way is not correct, but he certainly feels like he can't find his way again until the team works.
Used to the team needs to work. House that's much more in order.
He'd go to his team. They might give him a bit of back chat in theory, but they'd follow his word, and everyone would do their jobs well.
Yeah.
And that's how you work in the Interior Army. And he's coming. I think it's interesting you say that, Taj. Yeah, I think he's coming to the point where he realizes that he can't be that role here, and he can't be. This is not yet a well-oiled team, despite working well together at the outset.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I feel like, yeah, he hasn't quite got that sort of silent, sort of wink and nod, and everybody goes and everybody does the shit they need to do. There are still some lone wolves and secrets and things like that, which just don't fly for Six. I hope that answers your question. So, yeah, I feel like I banged on enough. So basically, I think, I touched on his Loxodon form, and I touched on the powerful, sort of string of ancient words. The last thing, apart from the journey with his brother to take his mum's ashes, Dan and I both feel like that story evolves as we go, and it tells us how it needs to be told. So we don't really have too much to say on that, I don't think. But it sort of reveals itself, hopefully. But the final thing is the fact that Six believes. I can't say either way, but Six definitely believes that his dad was the one that bestowed his celestial powers. He might think that the words evoked them, but they were bestowed, as his mum kept saying to him, that his dad was special, and his dad given him this gift. And your dad's up there. He's in the heavens. He's a celestial, and one day you'll see him. One day you'll get his power. You're destined for great things. The mum kept saying to him. He believes that is what he's being gifted, and maybe that began the story giving him a shade or two of arrogance. But
as did it with most kids growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting told similar things.
Yeah, exactly. You're special. You're special, son. You're special. It's my Barshot reference. But yeah, ultimately, I think that that him sort of turning towards his celestial side will reveal a lot more about the mother and father's relationship, and also Lack's mother and their shared mother's relationship. So that his Loxodon side, the celestial elephantine side. So did we put out, or are we waiting to put out our pilot as a special episode? I think we put it out, didn't we?
No, we didn't. We still haven't.
Okay, well, at some point we have a piece of content. Do you know what? I feel like we put it out, but there is a piece of content that has or will reveal sort of an ancient connection to Six, an ancient connection to his Loxodon form, involving Siluman, one of the original Loxodon champions. That has not yet been discussed heavily in the main campaign by Johnny, so I'm going to leave it to when it's appropriate. But yeah, so that's Six. that's Six in a nutshell. And I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to move on to Ripper because it's easy to forget that Ripper is half Indirian. He's half Indirian. What's the other half? Channelan.
Half Channelan, yeah.
So that's interesting. So maybe that can. I mean, do you have any idea of whether that can bring? And we'll talk about this, of course. But Octavius back from the brink.
Well, I think Octavius and Ripper have talked quite a lot about it, and there's been references that I've been able to understand. And talking like throughout the campaign and the way that Ripper's come out, I think that his father was Channelan and his mother was Indirian, and I think that's where he gets his sort of his unrelenting sort of backing down, stepping up to a challenge. You know, the fact that he can sit there on a battlefield and fight is because that's what his father was like. You know, he was the heavy hand, whether the mother was the sort of the debut. She wasn't a debutante in the sort of in the rich sense, but you know, she was well known in the village. You know, she was the reliable one in the village. I think people knew who she was. She was kind to everyone. She lent the ear and, you know, gave food to those that needed it, and so that kind of thing. And I think that's where Ripper gets his sort of ideology from. You know, his belief of wanting to sort of be helpful and be the person that sort of wants to help people, because, you know, if you can do it, one woman can do it in a village or a town, then, you know, you could do that across the whole world, or, you know, you could do that for everybody. It's like that's his belief system, right? Gain the enough experience to sort of not live one sheltered life, and so that when you go in, and I guess if you
So
I
there's
don't know
lots
whether
of boys,
people
aren't there?
want to agree.
That's what I remember you telling me. So he's one of
Oh,
many.
he's one of like 13. He's got a big ass family, you know, good Catholic family.
So is that what we're going to end up
villages,
doing?
good
We're going to
Illyrian
end up is that what one of his sort of so what he's done is he's gained the sort of the power of the light of Illyria, the blessing,
Yeah.
as an envoy of sorts, right? To sort of carry this, on in his own way. And I think he's doing that in the group, and I think we've talked about already how he's going to do that with each character in many ways. What's going to happen at the end? Not
Well,
right at the
I
end, of
wanna,
course.
I
Nobody
wanna.
knows that. But what
Well,
happens when he
I
gets
don't.
to
Well,
Indiri?
the
What
thing
happens
is,
when he
I
gets
think
to his family?
it's difficult, right? Because I think Ripper, no one really sets, like, you know, us as people, no one sets a journey off in their life with the idea of then returning home to live with their parents, right? Do you know what I mean? You sort of, and I think that's Ripper's ultimate idea. He's planning to go off, and if it means he comes back as a sort of, um you know, comes back and like almost like wants to show off, basically, like, you know, wants to come back to the high school reunion and have made something of himself, you know. And I think that was definitely Ripper's intention going out, and sort of the light of Illyria and spreading love and like harmonious activity um has been a bit strange for him, I think, over the journey. I think one of the things that Ripper's gone through is that he feels like he needs to be the happiest person in the room at all times, right? To keep everyone else up. Because if we all actually stop and turn and look at the darkness, it will consume us all. That's sort of his ideology, right? So he's got to be the one smiling. He's got to be the one doing something dumb. Because if people are laughing, people are, you know, and that's not a good ideology in real life, right? You should sort of deal with things, you know. You shouldn't keep running from the things that are plaguing you, because, you know, with the belief of, if I keep running, they won't catch me. That's not necessarily the right thing. But, you know, I think it's the and I think this is where Ryan, and one of the many times where Ryan and Ripper blend. Obviously sex appeal is the big thing. That, you know, that like if you've got you make everyone 1% happier in their day, you've made a difference to that person's life. And I think that's sort of where that allows me to play Ripper actually in a very genuine way, because then I can sort of see that's what he wants to do. Question from Taj about Ripper, right? And I absolutely love this question. Will there ever be a scene where Ripper's sex skills get put into a test in order to get a potential ally on side? So unfortunately, Johnny will always fade to black when anything sexual happens. He's talked about that at the beginning of this podcast. So
Yeah, not necessarily
I
unfortunately,
think
because I
I
think
think
it's because I think it's great to have everyone on the same page, and I
yeah,
think it's nice that so Johnny, basically, just to let you guys in on some of the chats, as a DM, I think safety is
yeah,
paramount, when you're playing this sort of game, and I think
player
it's up,
agency, yeah,
and it's up there with all of the other aspects of Dungeons and Dragons, the freedom and all sorts of other things. With that freedom also comes respect to your other players, and I think that
yeah,
and your viewers as well. That doesn't
yeah.
mean you can't tackle challenging subjects,
Well, so
and in
I
fact you
think
should
Ripper,
tackle
yeah.
challenging subjects,
So
right?
I think two things. I think three things. This one is we won't see it. It's it will fade to black, right? Um, but so unfortunately, Taj, I don't think there'll be a sex scene. However, Ripper is the face character. He is the most persuasive out of the group, so it won't necessarily be sex scenes. But maybe the fact of him trying to converse with someone, speak with someone, barter with someone, to maybe manipulate a room of people, sort of be almost like a lobbyist, like a positive lobbyist. Talk to this one to get this to through to there, like the paperclip thing. He's making sure everyone gets the things they want so they can all work together. And I think three, just like never forget, even if it's face of black, Ripper fucks. That, right? Anything, Ripper fucks, and at a high level as well. So Taj, you can just dream about it. You can just imagine that it's the best porn you've ever seen. Whenever Ripper goes down.
I'm gonna let you crawl yourself out of that one, Ryan. I'm
I
not gonna
won't crawl
follow up
myself
with
out
that.
that one. Ripper fucks, and yeah, I think that's what we need to get out
So,
of one.
well, I mean, I think it's interesting. No, it is interesting that Taj asked that question, because I think it's tricky, isn't it? It's really interesting to look at that sort of thing, to look at manipulation and to look at sexuality, and I think we move away from it being a positive. So, like in James Bond, I think for a long time that was seen as a positive, using
Yeah,
sexuality and sort of manipulation, but at the same time it's another tool in the arsenal,
yeah.
and if it's consensual, you can
Like I
still
don't.
use
I
it
think like I'd use
to
the word manipulation. That's not the right sort of term, but like as a face character, your
No,
persuasion
of
rolls,
course you
your deception
manipulate.
rolls.
It's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of like a spy. You would sort of,
Yeah,
you'd charm and you'd sort of get your way into
yeah.
rooms, and first of all, I don't think it's unfortunate, and I use the word unfortunately, but I don't think it's unfortunate. I think it's a nice level playing field, because you've got to remember that if Ripper gets to fuck on camera, it's not fair on the rest of the characters who don't have the same prowess. All right, so I think that when Johnny lays a fade to black down on sexual activity, I think if anything, it gives you a level playing field.
Well, it's
So as you said,
but
Taj can imagine it as much as he wants. We can all imagine it as much as we want, um, because Six loves to. He's a soldier. How else is he going to
yeah,
unwind?
loves to
You
get
know.
bummed.
Mate, he loves it any which way. Actually, I don't know if
I
I
think
don't know
it's
if I've even thought about Six's sexuality at all. I can just tell you definitively, because I don't know if Interior has a different view on sexuality.
mm,
Particularly, we've come from Cinello, which is, if it's modelled on ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and a variety of other sources, then it's going to definitely have more of a free-form approach to sort of sex and gender and sexuality. But yeah, so yeah, definitely Six, likes to sort of unwind in a sort of very carnal sense. And
oh,
I think,
Brad's asked a really important question: is Six a top or a bottom?
Thanks,
Also,
Matty.
welcome Brad to the stream. I know you've
Yeah,
been here
cheers,
for a
mate.
little bit. We haven't had a chance to address you.
We still haven't gone
We
over
are
your
coming
character yet, so you
to
can
you.
correct us when we get to you.
Yeah.
We're going to you after Faeza, which is after Ripper. But just to address your question, is he a top or a bottom? You, I know you're taking the piss, but I actually don't. I actually don't know. I
I
think
tell you
that
what, the next time we roll around to these questions, we'll have that one.
so he is not going to. I'll tell you, he is not. He is not. He doesn't pull rank, and he doesn't try and override those that are genuinely smarter, kinder, and more power. Power is an unusual word, but more powerful than he
Passionate,
is.
more passionate.
Yeah, but not even passion, but capability. So
Mm.
if someone is more capable than him, he will acquiesce to them, I think, almost every time if they've proven themselves.
It's a
So
good
he would
answer.
absolutely be a bottom if someone can prove themselves as a worthy top, and he would absolutely be a top if called upon. If the person below him was not capable, he would stand up in more ways than one.
Good answer. Good answer to that.
So yeah, no. I mean,
I think Ripper has he has an interesting relationship with everybody in the party. And I think he's that. Like I can't say this without sounding like I'm fluffing myself up, but he very much feels like he's the glue, right? He helps people like figure out what they're doing, knows a little bit about everyone. He speaks Gnomish to Faeza to make her feel more comfortable. He hangs out with the Indiri boys. He's got along well with Docs, and his and sort of their faith and their belief and him being the funny guy. And with the genuine relationship, I think um, the genuine relationship between Octavius and Ripper is interesting. It's like and I think coming back to what you said about the Janellan side of things, it is the sort of the light ribbing that he gives Octavius, and but then he doesn't sort of, but it's all. I don't even think it's banter because that can be considered like um provoking sometimes.
hmm.
I think it's and bullying almost sometimes as well. But I think the way he acts to them is just like he's trying to. I think he knows he's worth more than he is, and he's just trying to help it.
So I think it's a good thing to say, because I think that in a team, or certainly in a family, let's say as well, I think that you sometimes, provoking is the right word, I think, in a negative and a positive, because you can provoke people to get them out of the patterns they've thought themselves into. It's okay to sort of push someone, if you have their best intentions at heart, right? So if you love someone and you think they deserve better and you push them towards something better, some could regard you as overstepping your boundaries, but others could regard you as doing something altruistic, putting your neck on the line for somebody else. So yeah, I think that I see nothing impure about when they butt heads. I think it's lovely to see that sort of,
Mm,
that sort of relationship between them blossoming. Because in the group, Octavius doesn't have anyone like that.
yeah.
He's very stoic with Six, who's another soldier of sorts, and
Mm,
he's very sort of deferential to Faeza and so on. Um, and I've yet to see him bond with Docs, I think.
yeah.
Perhaps that's just me. Perhaps I was just making notes at the
And
time.
I think the Ripper, to talk about what we talked about earlier about the chaos sort of things, or the order of chaos. Um, I think Ripper understands that the world is grey, right? I think we've seen that with the way that he's bartered with criminal gangs in the same way that Lack has as well. And he's bribed guards, and he sort of he and now we've literally seen him kill right on the battlefield. I think he realizes that there are shades of grey to the world, but that doesn't mean that light can't come through. It's not darkness that he's staring into. um there is some times where you have to grease a few palms, deceive a few people, charm a few others to get the sort of the right things, but it's like moving in the right direction. If you can do those things to expose someone who's negative, or you can deceive your way into a slavery ring, which is the sort of one of the things that he fundamentally sort of stands against, to then dismantle it from the inside out. So I think he doesn't necessarily share Ripper doesn't necessarily share the same ideology of let's burn it down, but instead it's more like let's let's trim let's trim the bonsai tree, right? Let's not just cut it out and grow a new one, because that's going to take fucking ages. So
Well, that'll
that's
be
his sort
interesting
of
then
world.
when they all butt heads, or sort of not. But perhaps butt heads isn't the right term, but it'll be interesting when they all come to terms with how they go about
Yeah.
their order and chaos. Um,
Now, Brad mentioned that Octavius is definitely not representation of Chinella in many ways, and I
mm,
would say that as a player and as maybe Ripper has sort of seen, is that he doesn't know any different, right? He's only, he knew his father to be quite a stalwart person, like the Chinellan armies that we've seen, and then he's seen that in Octavius, and then he's also just seen nothing but oppression and those kind of things in Janella. So we haven't sort of seen those kind of things, and that's why he talks favorably about Indiri and less so about Janella. He's never. This was his first opportunity to sort of go and see it.
We've talked about, you're right. Well, we've talked about with Johnny the possibility of going back many months or years later to Chinella to see what has happened and see what sort of indirectly we've caused and maybe what we can do to help. And I think that it's possible. So like you were saying with Octavius, maybe understanding the Chinella that he loves and he knows, the Chinella that has made him feel uncomfortable about leaving. Has made him have to leave because of his discomfort. Maybe the Chinella that he knows that is not the Chinella we've seen. Maybe understanding that we would understand Octavius more. We would perhaps understand how to go back, burn down what we want to burn down, trim what we want to trim, and make a bonsai tree out of Chinella. Like maybe that, and we'll get to Octavius. Maybe when he comes back, that will be, if he comes back, that will be part of the conversation we have. Because understanding, when someone comes back and says, listen, I know the world is this. I know that Chinella is this, this, and this, and I'm sad that you haven't seen it, but we've got to fight to make it that again. That's something that could bring him and the group together.
Well, while we have got Bradley here for the small amount of time before the United game starts again, shall we take a look at the information we've got for Octavius?
Yes. I was hoping to do Octavius last because he's by far the most interesting at this junction.
Okay, well let's have a switch to Faeza. Let's talk about Faeza.
Yeah, we can chat about Octavius definitely. Faeza also, I'm only worried about chatting about Faeza too much because Christine has been sadly absent for the last few games.
Well, not sadly, happily absent because she's been off doing her things.
Yeah, sadly for me though. Sadly absent for us, happily absent for her. But we've been dying to have her and her opinions on certain things, so we may have some retcons afterwards. But yeah, no, I mean, when it comes to Octavius, the fight for us, of course, Bradley, you're welcome to correct us in the comments, but for Ryan and myself, and for us, it started with Octavius, as we mentioned earlier, being stunned into inaction at the start of the battle. So really, as Ryan said earlier on, maybe it had something to do with him being a scout, not being used to such a sort of canvas of war, which may or may not be true. But that's quite a faux pas. So for Six, that's quite a faux pas for a military man to sort of drop the ball like that, for a team member to drop the ball like that. But as we discussed after the stream, actually, if Octavius comes back, he's willing to forgive him very quickly because that's what you do with family. You forgive and you don't judge and you try and understand. So what happened is at the end of battle, so we had the battle at the end of battle, after Bradley dropped some serious lightning and some serious fireballs and whatnot, he saw Lack destroying the young Chinellan men in his way, and that, coupled with some of the other things that we may go into with Bradley when if he comes back, drove him away into the forest. And he was not present at the last episode where we were deciding what we were going to do with the future of the team. Now, what people at home are asking, so Taj's question about Octavius, let's address that first.
Yes. So is Octavius going to abscond and do his own thing, or is he so broken that he's going over to the dark side?
So Bradley mentioned in the notes that he sent to us that he believes, Octavius is at the point where he believes that he cannot return to Chinella. I guess he sees himself he uses the word villain, so he fully believes himself to be someone who has been ousted from Chinella, and that's how he feels about that, Ryan, as well, is something we don't know yet. We don't know what it feels like. So whilst we talked about Docs being a closed fist, when we ask Docs, he generally blossoms and he'll answer your questions. He's just closed until asked. Octavius has from the start been quite a closed book, and any attempts to get information from him has been met with a kind of resistance. Which
well,
you would.
I think that makes a fair point. Bradley just put in the chat as well. It was he's made a conscious decision to betray his countrymen.
At the start of that battle, so that was a conscious decision to betray his countrymen. Okay, and that's interesting because the rest of the team might think, well, because they would have no frame of reference for, people attack them, they kill them, or they war with them. And they were in Chinella, they would have felt, well, we're just killing people anyway. What's the difference? So for Octavius to be such a significant decision for him to have made, and one he's clearly still struggling with, I would imagine as Six that, like in this world, you don't know what you don't know. So Six doesn't know that that's why it's happened. Six doesn't know that that's the decision Octavius has made. He doesn't know
and
his relationship
there's a lot
with Chinella.
with Octavius that we've gone through in terms of history, in terms of character. We know that, with him being part of the Legion, with his mother being a legate, I believe, and the spirit bird being part of her, maybe part of her soul. A lot of his power comes from this bird. It comes from the Druids. The Druids are up north as well. So I think
does it come from the Druids?
Yeah, because he's a druid. So he was part of a special. He was part of a special crew.
Dox is a cleric.
Dox is a cleric ranger.
Okay.
And Octavius is a druid. So he was part of the special forces channel that was up in training in Nuremberg with the druids. That's why he's got this power. And there's still a lot of guarded secrets that we don't know about Octavius and the bird. And he's not revealed that, and we've not had the chance to as well. Sort of a lot of the times we've had engagements with other soldiers, they have known who he is. Ripper would always joke about him being Chinella's most eligible bachelor because everyone knows who he is, and he made that joke. But he comes from a line of I don't know if it's royalty or aristocracy, but it's something along those sort of ancient militaristic ideologies.
There's always been certainly a well-known military family. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's one of these scenarios where I would sort of challenge Bradley. So just to put it out there, we cannot reveal necessarily at this point whether Bradley's character Octavius is going to return or not. So you'll have to watch in the new year to find out. So sorry, Taj, to answer that question, we cannot reveal it. We simply can't.
And Bradley won't break it in the Twitch chat.
You wouldn't want us to, even if we knew the specifics. You wouldn't want us to do it. But one of my challenges for Bradley, if he comes back, is that Six is being a bit. Six wants answers to things, so he's willing to put himself out there and ask and to poke and to prod and he feels like if he gives answers of his own, people will volunteer answers, which often they do. So he has much more of a sort of melodramatic, sort of cinematic way of saying, right, let's all sit down and have a chat. Let's have a dialogue scene. I want to know what's going on. That's very much Six's way. And he's very lucky that he has his brother to bounce off of. So there's lots of interplay between them, and he often can find a way to reveal information to the group and to his brother. And I wonder, like Octavius, the type of character that he is, the type of sort of, we're all in the same genre, but we're all in different movies. That's how I sort of imagine it, and that's how it works, because our heads construct a different version of Erionwel and different characters around us, right? So if I'm in, the Lord of the Rings, where everyone sits down and has a council meeting every so often, or has a chat while they're walking through the woods about the state of the world and how everything's, going to get better and all this sort of stuff, or maybe I'm in a different movie. I don't know. Maybe I'm in Gattaca or something. I don't know. But if I'm in one of those, what movie is Octavius in, and how is he going to use that genre, that movie, to get his information across to us? How does he say to us, this is why I walked away. This is why at the start of battle I failed you. Right? This is why I failed you as a team at the start of battle. And how much of himself, how much of his belly does he show, and how, and does he? Is that his style? If he comes back, to sort of to allow the group to understand his pain. to allow the group to understand his journey, to allow the group to sort of see, where he is and where he's going. So that's so as Bradley's put in his notes, he sort of he only felt close to the party, and the fight has in Bradley's words put oil in the ointment. So that's
But whose ointment and whose oil? That's the questions we don't know.
So and also talking about Bradley talks about how in the notes how his purpose, very much like Ripper's, was fulfilled very early on. Some of his initial character goals and story goals and all that sort of stuff fulfilled very early on. But the mystery of the bird, whether and how that ties into the grander plot,
Mm-hmm.
and how, I mean, the bird is a storytelling resource. How does that resource help Octavius blossom or change or become a person that sort of can allow us all to support him? Because I think some of his nature to be quieter and more reserved pushes people away, I think. And in pushing us away, or perhaps preempting it by walking away himself, it stops us from actually knowing what pain he's going through and what thoughts are in his head, And in a movie or a TV show, or a game like this,
you'd be screaming at the TV, wouldn't you? Being like, just
why don't you just tell them? Just talk to them. So, but he has to do it in his own way.
Yeah,
he has to do it in Octavius's way. He's not going to do it in Sixsmith's way. I'm very lucky. I've created a character that just goes, I want the answers to this, please. Because that's how desperate he is for knowledge and answers. So just to cap it off, I don't know if there are any other questions in for Octavius or any other comments from
there
Brad.
hasn't been anything in any questions yet, but if there is one, let us know.
So yeah, I would find that if Octavius returned to the group, I would find that a very interesting interplay, and how Six takes things is how Six feels, in the moment. But he has a hard side and a soft side, as we all do, and let's see, which side is poked. I always feel that, in these sort of moments, does a character bristle you, or do they show their belly? And because I think Six is all about that. So yeah, I'm very intrigued as to if, when, how Bradley returns. Oh well, Bradley will always return, like James Bond. He'll always return.
Don't compare him to James Bond. He'll never let us live that one down. And now it's been just recorded and on stream now. So
but Bradley knows that he's about apart from being white, he's about as far from James Bond as a person can possibly be. Although we all are, to be fair, Brad. I'm not just ragging on you. But Brad will return, but whether Octavius returns, that remains to be seen in the new year. So that leaves us with Faeza. Now, we miss Christine. We miss Christine on the stream.
Absolutely.
She'll be returning on the 10th. Correct me if
not
I'm wrong.
Not just for her in-game abilities, but also her fervent note-taking.
Yeah, there were no note takers in the last session, so we hope the audience is keeping on top of it for us. So one of the big things for Faeza is that she had a mentor that was the world to her, absolutely the world. I remember Christine talking to me about this and telling me that it was all Faeza knew was my center, her mentor, and I think her decision to leave Zawati and chase down her missing mentor is really significant. So that takes her. She's young. She's fresh-faced. She doesn't know much about the world, and she comes out looking for this person. It's all she's ever known. As an artificer, so Faeza played by Christine, obviously. As an artificer, she's incredibly skilled. But in combat, and I think this probably is a great for Christine because it's true of Christine and Faeza, still learning how to sort of be, reach maximum efficacy in combat. So for her to be so close to finding her first real friend, which is my center, apparently has her outside of her comfort zone,
Well, it was
particularly
well,
about
it was finding her, not just finding a mentor, but bear in mind that she confided with Seat, played by Becki, and then and that was the first real person that she had, and then
well,
Seed
Seed
sacrificed
also
themselves.
Seed also looking for their mentor Hawthorne,
Mm.
and we're finding as we go through. Now, Becky's character Seed had roots in Nurmengard, so
Mm.
we're heading into Nurmengard, and we're learning that the two of them seem to have some kind of connection. Maybe they've been traveling together. So one of the major goals that we're doing next in Blood and Song, Erionwel, is that we're trying to hunt down my center or Hawthorne, and I believe that being alone like this has left Faeza unable to sort of entrust anyone with her secrets, entrust anyone with her faith. But apparently, Christine notes that she is craving somebody to do that. So she's trying to find the person, as you said, the person that will replace Seed as her confidant. Yeah. Christine and I talked about maybe that was Six, and it may yet still be, depending on what happens with Lack. If Lack moves further away from needing Six's mentorship, brotherhood. If he looks up to Docs, he may want somebody to sort of give that information to. So it may be Faeza and Six that move together, but as seen in the last few episodes, they've bristled still quite significantly, and I think Nurmengard is doing a number on everybody. It's quite mysterious. And so, being a gnome, being one of the few gnomes, being so far away from Zawati, I think that's
Mm.
I think that's doing a number on Faeza. But the key is
Yeah.
that she dreamt her dreams about the tree. Was it a tree on fire, or did they just make that up? It was the
It's a
great tree
tree
on
with
fire, wasn't it?
poisoned roots. It's a tree with
Oh, okay,
roots that are corrupted.
Whether that's prophetic, as in it may come to pass, or whether it's
Yeah.
speculative, that's really fascinating to me, because at some point, I'll be disappointed as a player, let alone as an audience member, if we don't get to go to Zawati and see the great tree. So with Faeza, we've had her be very, very open and honest. In a boat trip, she confided in Six, and we learned a bit more about her relationship with my center.
Mm. We know
And
what her relationship with Andra is like as well.
yeah, so she's very
very
that's it.
zealotous to it, and it's sacred to her, like very sacred to her.
Yeah, and so that's something that she shares with Ripper, isn't it? The sort of the faith. They both have the faith.
Mm.
And I believe it seems to be giving Faeza boons. It seems to be supporting Faeza. It seems to be something that she's benefiting from.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's very interesting to have such a pure character in the group, right? So isn't it? Because if you think about it, like a lot of our characters they have things they're struggling with. I think there's a lovely purity with Faeza, as in you see everything she's struggling with while she's doing it. The
Yeah.
baggage of her past hasn't yet surfaced. The baggage is almost, you
The
take all the
moral
baggage and you push it directly into my
decisions.
center.
Yeah, the moral decisions that we make, the great, as we're talking about, grey areas that we succumb to, is Faeza okay with those?
So great injustice is something that Christina's told me that Faeza cannot abide by. Remember when
Yeah.
she shot the guard or the oil or something? She made some oil.
She tripped up some guards chasing a randomer in the street.
Yeah. So she hates and she really didn't like Sixsmith's contact with the angel-like figure, and felt like he was overstepping his boundaries in the face of sort of a deity. So such a frail and weak character, she felt like Six was bullying him in a way, and so I think that she really powerfully responds to that. Whether that's at face value, whether she will translate that directly into we're the order of chaos, let's do it, You know, like I absolutely cannot abide by the way that the people in these worlds are being treated, or if she thinks this is not my fight or this is not what I want to happen. That may reveal itself after we find my center,
Yeah,
and we
and we
find out
find
what
out
kind of
who
person my
this
center
because
is.
I wonder if it's this element of, you know, don't meet your heroes, like um is this, but it's different because also my center brought her up. So is it going to be, is my center going to be the grand sort of knowledgeable, like font of knowledge and care and brilliance that we've been told about this entire time, or is it something that's the one side that Faeza ever saw of my center,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
he's actually a Del boy on the other side.
Yes, it's entirely possible, and that's as much of an exciting thing to confront as
Mm,
players and character and you know, as audience members ourselves as we watch it to try and find out.
yeah,
You know, and also, so this is what Christine has placed down on her note. She says that Faza still cares what this ragtag family think of her. So I think that in many ways, meeting my center is going to that's going to be the sort of galvanizing moment for Faza. What the group think of my center, what my center does for or to the group, that will probably set her, in my opinion. And I think Christine hopefully will agree, but if she doesn't, I'm hoping she'll let us know when she turns up on the 10th. Um, I think that will be the mark of how deeply Christine devotes herself to the Order of Chaos. It will, I think, it will in many ways, because she says in her notes that she's stronger than she knows, despite wanting to uh, go back to a simpler life. So she feels the pull of a simpler life, um, but perhaps that's not her path. And I have a feeling that this My Center character will be, yeah, will be the deciding factor, however
mm,
that ropes into our story. And I think it's probably worth noting just before we close off, answer any questions or chat about anything else. Hawthorne was the
yes,
mentor, is the mentor of Becky's character Seed. Um, Becky's character Becky left the show. Becky's character Seed saved the player characters, and but the story of Hawthorne has not yet been
yeah.
discovered.
As far as we know, Hawthorne and my center were traveling together, and I think that
In the inferences that were made, the mice Hawthorne is a wanted man. I think that's fair to say. There were some
yeah, he's
moments
also
where
a
the truth
very,
slipped out,
yeah, he's a
but
wanted
Seed
man, but
didn't realize that. Seed didn't know that he was a wanted man, and
yes,
believed him to be a wonderful bard, right, and a wonderful
like a schools
mentor.
basically, like
Yeah.
because when we spoke to the schools up here in Nuremberg, they said that, oh, he's the greatest musician, but then they also said he was dead. So, you know, so we don't know. But the last thing we heard, you know, we were following them up here to try and um discuss them.
Yeah, I think Six very much feels like he cannot rest or move on until he finds uh, my center and Hawthorne, particularly Hawthorne. He's going to help find my center for the sake of Faeza, because he thinks a person with their mind half on one thing and half on the other, which is probably why he wants to leave the army now that he's finding his cause. He
Hmm.
thinks that a mind half on one thing and half on the other isn't you know a safe mind to be around in combat and in strife. So he'll definitely help on that regard. But when it comes to Hawthorne, he saw on his way out Seed's architecture, some of how she was built, how she was made, what she was made out of. Um, and that's something fascinating to him and something that in Nurmengard or Zawati has not yet been explored. The artificial creation of some kind. And this is a quiet, secret little focus for Six in the back of his mind is that this is an unknown quantity. Is it a villainous force? Is it the growings of an army of something I've never seen before? Why is nobody being honest about it? And why did Seed keep that secret? Or indeed, why did Faeza keep that secret as well? So all these things are for Six. I can't speak for everybody else, but for Six,
Hmm.
that will come out when he confronts Hawthorne.
Bradley joining in. says something that Bradley, not Octavius, finds interesting is that wherever My Centre and Hawthorne go, and we have followed, the oil has been there.
Yeah, that is
So
interesting. Yeah.
are they these characters? And we've heard stories of the man with the hat, and then we also asked, is that the god of chaos? And now the god of chaos appears to be off Loki. So one of the things, Ripper's going to have to get some serious questions out of him.
Yeah, about the gods. Actually, it's good you brought that up, Brad. So this black tar, this oily sort of viscous ichor that has been following us around, or indeed we've been following it around in many ways. We see it when we first saw the shard? I believe so. I believe it's connected to the shard in some way. It coated the walls, I think, when we went to see when we went into the tomb of the gods. I believe that it was some sort of connection there. So this sort of this ichor, the oil also is noted to be connected to Dox's powers as well, by the way. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dox has some kind of taint, dark taint of the gods. Maybe that's part of why he was
on
ousted.
about the bit between his butt and his balls.
Yes, although that's not tanned. Of course, it's not dark at all because it does not see the sun, unless he handstands regularly. So the dark taint of Dox, which I want to see on a T-shirt, not the actual taint, just the words.
Yeah, Brad said in that it was in the
Dox.
Broken Cathedral and in the Festival of Falling Leaves too.
Yes.
So we've seen this around.
So part of me thinks that maybe Hawthorne and My Centre are dealing in some way with the gods, the nega gods, or the evil gods, or the proto gods, or the
god
titans
oil
or
salesman.
something. Yeah, the god oil salesman. Perhaps it is some kind of god oil.
Roll up. This black ichor cures everything.
You want to die? You're living and you want to die? Put the ichor on you. It'll sort it out. Yeah, so Dox, I'm sure Joffrey's guffawing away, knowing the secrets of his oily magic. But that seems like something that we will be discovering.
And he was also unsure of that when
the new year.
When he tried to when he used the power to revive Lack, off Loki changed the oily nature of his magic for negative or positive. At that time we don't know. So maybe we'll find out what that is there, which would be interesting.
Also, it'd be interesting to find out from off Loki or Lack, or both, the true nature of the angel that they met, the angel figure that they met in the tunnels. So Six never believed him, and it was the first moment where he really felt betrayed by his team for not having his instincts trusted. So it'd be interesting to see the fallout of some of that, and whether the angel figure was who he said he was. Off Loki seems to think he wasn't who he said he was, but then Off Loki can't necessarily be trusted.
Yeah.
And read that as Johnny can't necessarily be trusted. He's a shifty little bugger. But yeah, that's as is his want. But yeah, so I think we've probably touched upon most of the. We're obviously very sad to we're grateful that people are busy this year such that they can see their families, and
yes.
And after the couple of Christmases we've had, I'm really grateful for both the people who have dropped into the chats. Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah.
And
I'm very excited. I know we've got a couple of weeks before we get back into the main campaign. We're off again next week, so we will maybe have another something like this or some other piece of content potentially. But I know that that I'm staying with Sean at the minute, and we're sort of saying that actually yesterday we were like, oh man, I'm actually really looking forward to playing with the group tomorrow. So I think that's one of the things that
so we miss you guys, anyone who's not present currently, but we're grateful that you're spending the time with your families and so on. So we will. So thanks everybody for listening. I think we touched on everything that we're looking forward to as well. That's the thing. I mean, it's good to be reminded of all of the amazing possibilities of the next part of this season after the new year.
Last question from Taj in here was, any chance of new characters coming in the new year like Docs? We don't have any plans for any other player characters joining us in the new year, but I'm sure Johnny will come with a plethora of other NPCs and characters that we will either grow to love or we'll try and smash in the face, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good question actually. There are so many people that we want to bring onto the show, right? But as with all these things, there's a lot of scheduling involved. Not just the narrative side with Johnny and making sure they can fit in well, but making sure that they have a sort of space in their schedule. And as everything goes quote unquote back to normal or the new normal, um, it's even harder to sort of understand where we're going to be. So what I can tell you is there will be, regardless of what we're doing, whether we're still in the world of Erionwel, whether we move Erionwel to like 2 weeks, I mean, we do something else for 2 weeks. This is something that we're toying with. The idea of sort of giving Johnny some relief as a DM because we want to start families. We want to look after the families we already have. We may move to Erionwel for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and have something else on that. It's sort of an off week. I can tell you that like the amount of people that have shown interest in the amount of people we want to get on, there'll be new blood somewhere along the line, definitely. It just depends how, where, when, who. But I can tell you that if Joffrey's anything to go by, and I'm sure you guys will agree that we'll pick well and we'll have someone that we're grateful to have on.
I agree.
So yeah, thanks for that, Taj. Thanks for your comments.
Yeah, thanks for everyone's
Brad.
questions, and Brad, thanks for jumping in and answering questions as well.
Thanks, Ryan, for being here. We'll try and chuck something on the following Monday. We'll see, though. It may be less easy for us to do, but we'll have something for the people if we can.
All right, and you've got till the end to put the credits on before I come in there and beat you up. So you got to do it now.
I'm trying to I've got to select credits, and then I've got to select.